3 true creepy night drive horror stories. Story 1: The Vanishing Hitchhiker. Part 1: The Encounter. It was a foggy night on a rural highway, and Jeff was driving home after visiting a friend. The road was nearly deserted, with only the occasional pair of headlights piercing through the thick mist. As he navigated a particularly lonely stretch, Jeff saw a figure standing by the side of the road, hitchhiking. The hitchhiker was a young woman, drenched from the rain, her hair hanging in wet strands around her face. She wore a white dress, soaked through, clinging to her slender frame. Feeling a pang of sympathy, Jeff pulled over and offered her a ride. She got in, thanking him quietly, and they drove on in silence for a while. The woman mentioned that she needed to get to a nearby town, and Jeff agreed to take her there. Jeff tried to make conversation, but the woman remained silent, staring out the window. He noticed her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes seemed distant, haunted. Despite her eerie demeanor, Jeff felt compelled to help her. Part 2: Disappearance. As they approached a sharp curve, Jeff glanced over to say something, only to find the passenger seat empty. He slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, and looked around frantically, but there was no trace of her. The passenger door hadn't opened. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Shaken, Jeff continued driving to the town, determined to report the strange occurrence. When he described the woman to the local police, their expressions turned grim. One officer pulled out an old photo of a young woman. It was her. She had died in a car accident on that very curve years ago. Jeff's blood ran cold as he realized he had given a ride to a ghost, forever haunting the road where she lost her life. Part 3: The Investigation. Days turned into weeks, and Jeff couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He returned to the site of the accident, leaving flowers and speaking to the empty air, hoping Sarah could hear him. He began researching her life, uncovering details about her tragic death and the circumstances leading up to it. Sarah had been a beloved school teacher, rushing home to her sick child on the night of the accident. Jeff visited the local library, combing through old newspapers and public records. He found articles detailing the crash, eyewitness accounts, and even Sarah's obituary. Part 4: Meeting the Family. Determined to help Sarah find peace, Jeff sought out her surviving family. He discovered that her son, Tommy, had moved to a nearby town. Jeff arranged to meet Tommy, sharing his encounter with Sarah and the strange events that followed. Tommy was initially skeptical, but the details Jeff provided were convincing. Jeff described Sarah's appearance, her demeanor, and even specific phrases she had used. Tommy, moved to tears, admitted he had always felt his mother's presence, but had never had any tangible proof. Part 5: Unraveling the Mystery. Jeff and Tommy began working together, performing small rituals at the accident site. They planted a garden with Sarah's favorite flowers and erected a small memorial plaque. These acts were both therapeutic and symbolic, serving to honor Sarah's memory and create a sense of closure. Tommy shared stories of his childhood, the pain of losing his mother, and the strange occurrences that had followed him throughout his life, objects moving on their own, the sound of his mother's voice calling to him in the night. Part 6: The Second Encounter. One stormy night, Jeff felt an irresistible pull to drive the same route. This time, Tommy joined him. As they neared Dead Man's Turn, the mist grew thicker, and once again, they saw Sarah standing by the road. They pulled over, and Sarah got in, her presence more tangible than ever before. "Thank you," she said, looking at Tommy with love and sorrow. "I've been waiting for you." Tommy, tears streaming down his face, told his mother he loved her and that it was time for her to rest. He assured her that he was okay, that he had lived a good life and found his own peace. As they drove toward the town, Sarah's form began to glow softly before fading away completely. Part 7: Conclusion. In the days that followed, both Jeff and Tommy felt a profound sense of relief. The strange occurrences in Tommy's life ceased, and Jeff felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They continued to maintain Sarah's memorial, turning it into a community space where people could reflect and find solace. Jeff's story became a local legend, a tale of a man who helped a restless spirit find peace. It was no longer just a ghost story, but a narrative of love, loss, and the enduring power of family bonds. The road was still known for its eerie fog and dangerous curves, but it also became a symbol of redemption and hope. Jeff went on to write a book about his experiences, detailing not just the haunting but the journey of healing and understanding. Story 2: The Shadow in the Rear View. Part 1: The Uneasy Drive. Emily had a long drive ahead of her, heading home from a late-night shift. The road was dark, lined with dense trees, and the only sound was the steady hum of her car's engine. As she drove, she kept glancing in the rearview mirror, feeling uneasy as if she were being watched. About halfway through her journey, Emily noticed something odd in the mirror. A dark, indistinct figure seemed to be sitting in the back seat. Her heart raced, and she whipped her head around to look directly at the back seat, but it was empty. Convincing herself it was a trick of the light, she tried to focus on the road. Part 2: The Apparition. Minutes later, the figure appeared again, clearer this time. Emily could make out its hollow eyes staring back at her. Panic set in, and she pulled over to the side of the road, jumping out of the car. She searched the back seat, even checked under the seats, but found nothing. Terrified, she called her brother, who advised her to get home as quickly as possible. Emily resumed driving, this time avoiding the rearview mirror. When she finally arrived home, she ran inside, locking the doors behind her. Part 3: The Haunting. The next morning, Emily found scratches on the inside of her car's back door, as if something had been trying to claw its way out. She never drove that route at night again, haunted by the memory of the shadowy figure that may still be lurking in the darkness. Emily began experiencing strange occurrences in her home. Objects would move on their own, and she often felt a cold presence behind her. She confided in her brother, who suggested she might be haunted. Part 4: Seeking Help. Desperate for answers, Emily sought out a local paranormal expert, Dr. Lawson, who had a reputation for dealing with hauntings. Dr. Lawson agreed to investigate and spent several nights in Emily's house, documenting the strange phenomena. Dr. Lawson discovered that the entity was likely a restless spirit attached to Emily after her encounter on the road. The scratches in the car and the cold presence were signs of its frustration and inability to communicate. Part 5: Uncovering the Past. Emily and Dr. Lawson dug into the history of the road where she first saw the figure. They found records of a tragic accident years ago, a car crash that killed a man and his young daughter. The man had been driving late at night, much like Emily, when he lost control and veered off the road. Emily felt a deep connection to the young girl, who seemed to be the source of the haunting. She began to have vivid dreams of the girl, always alone and scared, reaching out for help. Part 6: The Resolution. Dr. Lawson suggested a cleansing ritual to help the spirit find peace. Emily agreed, and they performed the ritual at the site of the accident. Emily spoke to the spirit, assuring her that she was safe and could move on. During the ritual, Emily felt a cold breeze pass through her, and the figure appeared one last time in the mirror, this time with a peaceful expression. The temperature in the car returned to normal, and the uneasy feeling vanished. Part 7: Moving Forward. Emily felt a sense of relief and closure. The strange occurrences in her home ceased, and she no longer felt the cold presence. She continued to visit the site of the accident, leaving flowers and maintaining a small memorial for the young girl. Emily's experience became a story of compassion and understanding, showing how even in death, connections can be made and peace can be found. She shared her story with others, helping those who had experienced similar hauntings to find their own resolutions. Story 3: The Abandoned Car. Part 1: The Discovery. Mike was driving through a remote mountain pass, returning from a weekend camping trip. The winding roads were deserted, and the only light came from his headlights cutting through the pitch-black night. As he rounded a bend, he saw an old, abandoned car parked on the shoulder. The car's doors were open, and it looked like it had been there for a while. Curiosity getting the better of him, Mike decided to stop and check if anyone needed help. He got out of his car and approached the abandoned vehicle, calling out to see if anyone was around. There was no response. Part 2: The Investigation. As Mike inspected the car, he felt a sudden drop in temperature, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. The interior was empty, but there was a faint, foul smell. He noticed claw marks on the seats and what looked like dried blood on the steering wheel. Uneasy, Mike hurried back to his car, deciding it was best to leave and report the car to the authorities when he had a signal. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw a pair of glowing eyes watching him from the darkness by the abandoned car. Part 3: Reporting the Incident. Mike didn't stop driving until he reached the nearest town. He found the local police station and reported the abandoned car to the authorities. The officers listened to his account with a mixture of concern and skepticism, but assured him they would investigate. A few days later, Mike received a call from Officer Daniels, the lead investigator on the case. Daniels informed Mike that the car had indeed been found abandoned, but there were no signs of the owner or any recent activity. The claw marks and dried blood added a disturbing element to the mystery. Part 4: The Local Legends. Intrigued and disturbed, Mike decided to dig deeper into the local history. He visited the town library and spoke with the older residents, hoping to uncover any legends or stories that might explain what he had seen. Mike learned about a series of mysterious disappearances that had occurred in the area over the past few decades. The locals spoke of a creature that roamed the mountains, luring unsuspecting travelers with the sight of an abandoned vehicle, waiting to claim its next victim. They called it the Mountain Stalker. Part 5: The Search for Answers. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Mike teamed up with Officer Daniels. They began investigating the disappearances, looking for any common threads. They interviewed the families of the missing people, combed through old police reports, and even consulted with a local historian, Mrs. Hensley, who had written extensively about the region's folklore. Mrs. Hensley shared chilling tales of the Mountain Stalker, a creature said to be half man, half beast, with glowing eyes and a hunger for human flesh. According to legend, the stalker was the spirit of a man who had been wronged and left to die in the mountains centuries ago. His spirit, twisted by rage and pain, had taken on a monstrous form. Part 6: The Expedition. Convinced that the legend held a grain of truth, Mike and Officer Daniels organized an expedition to find the creature. They were joined by a small group of volunteers, including Mrs. Hensley, a local tracker named Sam, and Dr. Carter, a biologist interested in cryptids. Equipped with camping gear, weapons, and recording devices, the group ventured into the mountains. They followed the trail where the abandoned car had been found, hoping to uncover any clues that might lead them to the stalker. Part 7: The First Night. On the first night, the group set up camp near the site of the abandoned car. They took turns keeping watch, but the night passed uneventfully. However, as dawn approached, they found strange tracks around their campsite, large, clawed footprints that seemed to appear out of nowhere and disappear just as mysteriously. Dr. Carter collected samples from the tracks, hoping to analyze them for any clues about the creature's origins. The group pressed on, following the trail deeper into the mountains. Part 8: The Encounter. As they ventured further, the terrain became more rugged and the air grew colder. The sense of being watched grew stronger, and the group's nerves were on edge. One evening, as they prepared to set up camp, they heard a low, guttural growl echoing through the trees. Sam, the tracker, signaled for silence and motioned for the group to follow him. They crept through the underbrush, moving toward the sound. Suddenly, they came face to face with the mountain stalker. It was a hulking figure, covered in matted fur, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The creature let out a deafening roar and charged at them. The group scattered, firing their weapons in a desperate attempt to fend it off. The stalker was hit multiple times, but it seemed unfazed by the bullets. In the chaos, Mike managed to throw a flare at the creature, which caused it to retreat with a pained howl. Part 9: The Aftermath. Shaken but unharmed, the group regrouped and assessed their situation. They had confirmed the existence of the stalker, but it was far more formidable than they had anticipated. Dr. Carter suggested they might be dealing with a supernatural entity, which explained the creature's resilience to conventional weapons. They decided to head back to town to regroup and come up with a new plan. Mrs. Hensley suggested they consult with a local shaman who might have knowledge of how to deal with such a creature. Part 10: The Shaman's Wisdom. Back in town, the group sought out the shaman, an elderly man named Grey Wolf. He listened to their story and nodded gravely. Grey Wolf explained that the mountain stalker was indeed a vengeful spirit, bound to the mountains by a curse. The only way to stop it was to perform a ritual to release the spirit from its torment. Grey Wolf provided them with the necessary ingredients and instructions for the ritual. They needed to return to the site of the original injustice, perform the ritual there, and offer a token of peace to the spirit. Part 11: The Final Confrontation. Armed with this new knowledge, the group returned to the mountains. They retraced their steps to the site of the abandoned car, where they believed the spirit had first been wronged. Grey Wolf accompanied them, guiding them through the ritual. As they began the ritual, the air grew cold and the forest fell silent. The mountain stalker appeared, its eyes filled with rage. The group held their ground, reciting the incantations Grey Wolf had taught them. They offered a piece of jewelry that had belonged to the man who had been wronged, a symbol of reconciliation. The creature let out a final, anguished roar and began to dissolve into the mist. As the spirit faded, the forest seemed to come alive again, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Part 12: Conclusion. The group returned to town, exhausted but victorious. The disappearances in the mountains ceased, and the legend of the mountain stalker slowly faded into history. Mike and Officer Daniels documented their experience, sharing it with the authorities and the local community. Mike continued to visit the mountains, but now with a sense of peace rather than fear. He knew the spirit had found rest, and the mountain pass was safe once more. The story of the abandoned car became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power of unresolved grievances and the importance of seeking peace. Mike went on to write a book about the adventure, detailing not just the horror but the journey of understanding and reconciliation. His story served as a testament to the enduring power of human courage and compassion, even in the face of the unknown.